is Nadine with DIY Sweets with Nadine. My first video that I wanted to share with you is of a chocolate mousse cake that I tasted while on my cruise in Alaska this summer. We liked it so much that we wanted to have it every night. So I came home and I did some experimenting, and I think I came pretty close to the recipe. So I'm going to share what I came up with so that you can try it. This is a great recipe for small parties, or you could even do it with a large group. The first thing we need to do in making our chocolate mousse cake is to make the cake part that the chocolate mousse is going to go on. So you need to start with a small bowl, and I use this as a sifter, and I'm just going to put 1 cup flour, a half a cup of cocoa, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to tap this and sift it, and the flour and the cocoa and the salt is all going to go into my small bowl. You can also use a regular sifter. I just find half the time those sifters don't work very well, so I like just using a strainer. So as soon as I get this sifted, we'll move on to the next step. You can go ahead and sift yours too. As you can see, I have it all sifted now. So now I'm ready to just put this aside, and I'm going to bring this other bowl over here. In this bowl, we are going to mix the eggs, the vanilla, and the sugar, and then we'll slowly add those dry ingredients to the egg mixture. So first what I need to do is I'm going to take 6 eggs, and I'm just going to crack them and put them in the bowl. So once I have the eggs added, I'm going to take my hand mixer and I'm going to just mix this slightly, just until it's mixed up. So I just want to mix this up. Now, at this point, I want to add the vanilla and the sugar. So I'm going to measure out 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then we're going to add a cup of sugar. Okay, so now we're just going to mix this up on high speed for 8 minutes. So I'll keep this going for 8 minutes, and once the 8 minutes are up, we will go ahead and come back and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, now that our 8 minutes is up, we're ready to turn this off and see how smooth that looks and how fluffy, and it's just almost doubled or tripled in volume. So now what we're going to do is we're going to keep the beater on low while we slowly add the dry ingredients, because we don't want them to fly all over. So we're just going to slowly moisten it up by adding them slowly. Got the ingredients in now. I just need to mix it until it's all mixed in. Okay, so now you see that's all mixed up really nice. Now we're just going to turn this off, and we're ready to put it into the pan. Here's my half-sheet jelly roll pan. I like to use silicone mats with it, but you're also okay to use parchment paper. Basically, you want to make it so the cake's not going to stick to the bottom. You're still going to want to spray it down, and then you're just going to take this cake mix and you're just going to dump it in the pan. Now, we're going to want this to be very thin. We don't want a lot of cake at the bottom of our mousse. It's going to be mostly mousse with just a little bit of cake. So we want to just spread this really thin in our pan. And once we have it all spread out in the pan, we'll be ready to bake it. We bake it in a 350-degree oven, and probably only going to need to bake it about 10 minutes. You want to start checking it about 10 minutes. Normally you would cook and bake much longer, but because this is so thin, we don't want to overbake it. So probably just about 10 minutes. So I'm going to stick this in the oven, and then we'll be back as soon as it's done, and I will show you what we need to do next. Okay, so now our cake is cooked. We get to start having fun putting it together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just take a round cutter, and you can pick the size. Whatever size you pick is going to determine how big it is. Because this is a very rich dessert, I didn't want too big of a circle. So I picked one, it's probably about 2 inches, somewhere around there. And you're just going to put it on the cake like that, and you're going to cut, okay? Then you're just going to go ahead and continue doing that until you have the whole cake cut. So now that I'm done doing all of the cuts, all I'm going to do is I'm going to lift out the extra cake that I don't need. You can either lift out the circles or you can lift out the cake around it. Sometimes one comes out easier, sometimes the other. But the point is you want to make sure you get all of the cake's circles out and ready to use for the next part. This part you're not going to use for anything. Feel free to eat it, or you can just throw it away. Use it whatever you want. Maybe you want to make some parfaits and break up the cake into that. Lots of ways you could use it. So once you get all this separated, you'll be ready to move on to our next step. Almost have them all separated. Okay, so now that I have all the circles out of there, I'm going to just take this and get rid of it. And I've got some people in my family that would probably enjoy eating this. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to let them eat it. So I'll put it out of the way so that they can eat it later. And then we'll be ready to move on. Okay, so our next step is we're going to take these little circles that we've made, and we want them to be about this thin. So when I look at this one, this was on the edge, and so it's about the right size. So I'm just going to stick it on my pan so it's ready for the next thing. But as I look at like this one right here, that is way too thick. We want it about half that size. So I just have this here, and I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to just take about halfway, and I'm going to cut in just a little bit, and I'm going to continue around, just cutting in a small amount. I don't want to try to cut all the way through. I'm just going to keep going around. And sometimes when you cut, you'll find your bottom layer will always be just about right. There it is. And then you've also got this layer that if it's thick enough, you can use it too. If not, you can just dispose of that. Either way, because you're going to have quite a few of these anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to continue to get all these ready. If they're thin enough, I'll put them on. If not, I'm going to cut them. So you go ahead with yours and get yours ready, and you're just going to fill up 1 or 2 pans like this. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put these little acetate rounds on our cake so that we have a place to put the filling so it can set up. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut a bunch of acetates the right size. So here's another one that I've cut, and I'll show you after in a minute how to cut it. But after you have it cut, and I made it 2 inches high because this is a really rich dessert and I didn't really want too big of a piece. I want it to be something that people can enjoy, but I want it not to be so filling. So once I've taped this, I'm just going to stick it over that cake and push it down. And if it cuts a little bit more cake off, that's okay. It'll give us a nice clean cake. So I've got 2 of them there. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest. Plus I'm going to show you how to cut more strips here so that you'll be able to cut yours. So now I'm ready to take the rest of this piece of acetate and the other sheets and cut some more strips. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to take the piece of acetate and I'm going to use my paper cutter and cut 2-inch strips. I'm just going to slide this into the 2-inch thing so that I have 2-inch strips. Almost done cutting the 2-inch strips. And then I'm going to show you how I figured out how long to make them. Okay, so I've got from that acetate my 2-inch strips. So now I'm just going to take this cutter that we used and I'm just going to put this inside that cutter and spread it out. And then I'm going to pull it out. And then I know that I need it to be right about there because I want some overlapping. And then what I did is I measured this on my cutter and I saw that it was basically 7 inches. So then I knew I needed to cut them all 7 inches. Now, if you want to do it quicker, instead of cutting them all individually, acetate's pretty thin. You can just take it all of those that we just cut from the strip, put it at the 7 inches. And then in one cut, we should have it. So now all of these are ready to go around the little cakes. Now, I'm going to continue cutting until I get enough for my cakes, and I've got several sheets of acetate, so I'll just keep cutting, and then I'll be back with you as soon as I get done with that. Okay, so now I have all of these ready to go. It's important these are ready to go before you start on the mousse part, because once the mousse part is done, you have to be able to pour them in here quickly. So make sure these are all ready first, and now I'll show you how to do the mousse part. Okay, so I've got my pan here, and I'm going to put into the pan my eggs, and it calls for 8 eggs. So I'm just going to quickly put 8 eggs into the pan. Now I like to just take a whisk at this point and just kind of mix the eggs up so that the yolks and the whites are mixed together. Now as we're cooking it, we'll be using a spoon, but I like to have my eggs all mixed together before I move on to the other part. So I'm going to add those 8 eggs, and then after I have those 8 eggs mixed up good, I'm going to add my sugar. And I'm going to just use a spoon for this part, and I'm going to stir. I want to stir it all together. At this point, I do not have any heat on. I'm just mixing to get the eggs and the sugar well mixed and blended together. Because we don't want to start cooking it until it's all blended well together. So at this point, I am just blending the eggs and the sugar. Okay, once they're blended, I'm going to turn the heat on. And it says to cook it at a low temperature. And you're going to cook this until the mixture reaches 160 degrees. And to be sure, I stick a candy thermometer in there so that I can see when it's reaching 160 degrees. So I want to make sure that my chocolate is melted before the other mixture comes to 160 degrees. So I'm going to stick this in the microwave and start melting it. Now, my microwave has a chocolate setting, so it makes it really easy. If you don't have a chocolate setting, you're going to want to take it out and stir it about every 30 seconds or so, because you don't want the chocolate to get too hot. So with mine, with it having a microwave chocolate setting, I'm able to just kind of stir it and let it go as I'm cooking this. And I don't have to watch it quite so closely. Also, if you don't have a chocolate setting on your microwave, you're going to want to make sure it's only set at about 70%, because again, you don't want it too hot, and you do want to stir it about every minute. What I use, it has to be unsweetened chocolate. And so what I used is the Baker's unsweetened chocolate. There's lots of brands out there. Just get the bars of the unsweetened chocolate and break them up, and then you'll be ready to melt them. Okay? This has been in for about a minute, the chocolate. And so now I'm just going to stir it. As you can see, it's not ready yet. So I just want to stir it to make sure that you don't get all melted. And then I'm just going to stick it back in there and let it go for a little bit longer. I'm just going to keep doing that until it's completely ready. So I took this out of the microwave, and it's most of the way melted. There's still a little bit more that needs to be melted. So I'm going to stick it in just for like 30 seconds, if even that long, just to melt the last little bit. And then it'll be ready for the next thing that I do with that. Okay, I took this back out after cooking it some more, and it's looking pretty good. There was just a couple of really small chunks, and as I stir that up, they melt, because that's kind of how chocolate is. Sometimes it looks like it's not melted, so you need to stir it, and when you stir it, you'll see it's melted. So this is ready for the next step with that, and we will get to that after we're done cooking the eggs and the sugar. So I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to finish cooking the eggs and sugar, and then I will be back to show you what we do after the eggs and sugar are done. So we're just about to 160. It's at 155. So we're just going to stir for just another minute till we get it to about 160. Okay. It's just basically right about there. We have reached 160, so now we're going to turn the heat off on the oven, on the stove, move this off of the plate, and now we are going to put all of that chocolate that we melted, that unsweetened chocolate, into our egg and sugar mixture. And we're also going to pour in our vanilla. Now we're just going to stir this until it's well blended and smooth. Once we get this smooth and well blended, we're going to have it cool to to 90 degrees, to lukewarm. So I'm just going to kind of keep my thermometer in there so that I know when it's cool enough. But after it's well blended, as you can see, let me put it right here. As you can see, that's pretty smooth and well blended. So I'm pretty much done stirring it. So I'm just going to leave that here to cool down. It's already dropped about 10 degrees. So hopefully by the time I get the next couple of steps done, that'll get down to 90 degrees. So now what we're going to do is we are going to beat up the butter. So now I'm going to take my butter that has been out of the refrigerator for probably a couple of hours, and it's now room temperature. And I'm going to put it in the bowl. And then I'm going to beat this on high until it is light and fluffy. So let me get this in the bowl. And with it being at room temperature, it doesn't really take all that long to get this light and fluffy. We do want to make sure it gets there. As you can see, that whips up really quick to light and fluffy because we brought it to room temperature. If you still have it cold, it's not going to whip up very well. Because we brought it to room temperature, it's right there already. It is light and fluffy. Now in this bowl, while we're waiting for that chocolate to cool, we are going to pour our whipping cream in here. And we're going to beat this until it is starting to thicken up. And I don't want to start out too fast because then it's going to fly all over. But I am going to slowly increase the speed until I figure out how high I can whip it without it splashing out at me. As you can see, the whipped cream is starting to whip up. And I'm just going to keep whipping it until it starts to thicken. As soon as it starts to thicken, we'll add our powdered sugar that we have, or our confectionery sugar, and then we will whip it until it forms stiff peaks. Okay. So you can see it's starting to thicken up. So now we're ready to add the confectioner's sugar. And then we're just going to keep beating it until it forms stiff peaks. So as you can see, we now have stiff peaks. So now we're going to be ready to move on and mix all of our things together. So our chocolate here, we're going to stir it one last time. It's basically right there at about 90 degrees. It's still a little bit warm, but it is all but at 90 degrees. So we're going to take that thermometer out. And we're just going to stir this, make sure it's smooth. And then we're going to put it in here. Then we're going to turn the beaters on, and we're going to beat it for 5 minutes until it's light and fluffy. So let me just pour this in here. Okay, and then we're going to beat this on high until it's light and fluffy. 5 minutes is what the recipe calls for. So this has now been going for about 5 minutes. And as you can see, it looks quite light and fluffy. So now I'm just going to turn this off. Put these aside. And now we're going to get that whipped cream that we whipped up a few minutes ago. And we're just going to put it in here. And then we're going to fold it gently. We don't want to stir it. We don't want to beat it. We just want to fold it till it's all mixed in. So we just want to fold everything in. So when you fold, you just lift up and go down. You're just going to fold it in very carefully, okay? And this may take a few minutes because you want to make sure that it's all the same color. That's how you will know it is mixed in. It will all be the same color. When you see the different colors there, you know you still have a lot of whipped cream you need to mix in. But once we get it all to be the same color, and that's why we're going from the bottom to the top, we're just folding it in. And this is actually going to become fairly liquidy again, which is good because we're going to be pouring it into those cake mold things that we made before we started doing this part. Remember I said we needed to have those done before we did this, because we want to be able to just put this right in there so that we can start setting it up. As you can see, there's just a few chunks of whipped cream left. So we're just going to fold till we get rid of those few chunks of whipped cream. Okay, it looks like we have a nice smooth mixture. So now we're going to go and put it in our cakes. And we're just going to scoop out some of our French silk or our mousse stuff and just pour it right into the mold. And you don't have to fill the mold all the way up. You want to fill it till it looks about right. See, for me, that looks about right. And I'll show you about how full it is at eye level once I get them all filled. So I'm just going to go through, and this can be a little bit messy. If you get a little bit on the sides, that's okay, because it's going to set up, and then we'll be able to take the thing off and you won't even notice that. So I'm just going to fill all these up with our mousse. And as soon as I get them filled up, I will come back and tell you what we need to do from there. This is about how full you're going to fill them. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this whole tray and we're going to put it in the refrigerator, and it's going to set up for at least 6 hours. Now as you're filling these, you might notice that some of it's seeping out at the bottom. That's okay, because it's going to set up, and when it sets up, we'll just scrape that part off and it'll be okay. So once you have them full, you're going to quickly get it to the refrigerator and let it set up for at least 6 hours. Okay, so I have let our dessert sit overnight, which is more than the 6 hours that's required. So now all we're ready to do is to undo the dessert. So here's our dessert, and you're just going to stick it on a plate, and then you're going to take a knife to loosen around the edges. Okay, so here's my dessert on the plate, and I'm just going to take my knife, and this is a little soft, so you may have to fix it up once you take the plastic off. You may need to spread it to smooth it if you really want a smooth finish. But after you've taken a knife around it, you're just going to find the tape, find where the two ends meet, and you're just going to peel it open. And then you can serve it like that, or you can just take your knife and just kind of smooth the edges out a little bit. Depends on how much you want the presentation to be. So as I said, if you were having a wedding reception, this would go really well. You could make all of these the day in advance. You'd probably want to, depend on how many you're serving, you'd want to make several batches of it, or make the batch that much bigger so that it doesn't really take that much more time. So like if you were serving, this one's made, I believe it was 35. So if you were to do a wedding reception, you might have to make 4 or 5 batches of it, but you could double or triple the batch to make it so that it wasn't that overwhelming. If you were doing a small dinner party, you might want to half the recipe because you'd only want enough for 8 or 10 people. But you can make them bigger by using bigger cookie rounds. So it's really up to you. How many you can get out of it depends on the cookie round. So here is our chocolate mousse cake. Enjoy. And this again is DIY Sweets with